Hey everyone, Anne O'Connell with OC Publishing here, and today is the author journey. Welcome to those of you who have not joined us before, and welcome back to anyone who's watching and is a regular. We just love folks that come back week after week, and just remember, if you have a question for myself or our guest, make sure you pop it into the comments and we'll get to it while we're chatting. So I seem to have like a spate of mystery writers, and it's probably because it's in my mind, just having released my latest mystery novel. So today's guest is Barbara Emodi, and I just finished reading her first book, Crafting for Murder. Look how cute is that? And of course, now I'm a big fan, and all of her other books are now on my TBR pile. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about Barbara, and then I'll bring her up to join me. And I will actually also show her website while I'm chatting about her. Barbara has written sewing how-to books and now writes cozy mysteries set in Nova Scotia, Canada. Gasper's Cove doesn't really exist, but it will seem awfully familiar to anyone who lives where she does. The community is based on all she believes matters in life: extended family, companion animals, good food, and more sewing, crafting, quilting, and knitting projects than any reasonable person could take on. Barbara writes what she likes to read: whimsical, witty, warm books that reflect her belief that there is nothing ordinary about ordinary people. She also likes clever surprises, important in mysteries, and promises one at the end of each book. To visit Gasper's Cove yourself, you can read Barbara's novels in her Gasper's Cove mystery series or her Gasper's Cove Quick Cozies novella series. So let's bring Barbara up to say hello and tell us all about her author journey.
Okay.
Hi, Barbara. How are you?
I'm great.
Well, we're so excited to have you here on the author journey. And even though you are from my neck of the woods here in Halifax, Nova Scotia, you're coming to us from the west coast of the US. You're in California, aren't you?
Yes, I have grandchildren here. So, yeah, I've just come down for a couple of weeks.
Oh, that's nice. But you said the temperature isn't quite as warm as we would suspect it.
No, California is an enormous state, and I am in Berkeley, which is just across the bay from San Francisco. So I always bring the wrong clothes. It's year round. It's like end of September in Nova Scotia. So it's cool at night. You wear a sweater till lunchtime. You take it off in the afternoon. You put it on in the evening. That's the temperature here.
Well, that's probably exactly what you're used to because, growing up in this part of the world, we always took a sweater with us.
Yeah, of course.
Right? Even in the summertime. So thank you again for joining us today. And this was such a cute story. You and I met at Booktoberfest in October, and I was making my rounds, and your covers really stand out. So when you say cozy mysteries, Gasper's Cove, what type of a feeling do you want your titles and these covers to elicit in somebody who's walking by your table?
I think that that's a really good question. I think covers are incredibly important. I think people tend to downplay their significance. I'll tell you something. Last summer, I got a tick bite, and I ended up having to go down in the mornings for like a week and get IV antibiotics. So I took a cozy mystery with me, and I would describe my books as something cheerful that you could read while you're getting IV antibiotics. Does this make sense?
Yes.
Feel good sounds sort of. I try. Nova Scotia is so quirky. And we are all people enjoyers and people watchers. And that's kind of my motivation. I started writing because I felt I have that messy kitchen drawer that's full of your odds and ends. At my age, I had a messy kitchen drawer of like anecdotes, little stories, one-liners from people. They're kind of all true, and I wanted to have somewhere to put them. So that's what my books, that's their purpose in the literary world. And the covers are fun because I want people to know what they're getting. They're getting
Yes.
something cheerful.
I love that. And it's when I read your bio and when we were chatting backstage, I'm like, oh my goodness, like this woman is obviously a maritimer. We have a lot in common, having you taught at the Mount, I went to the Mount. And our backgrounds are similar in that, you have this whole professional career in communications, in journalism, and this totally blew me away. You only started sort of this novelist hat about 3 years ago, and you have 7 books in the Gasper's Cove Mysteries and more. And I always like to give a shout out to the publisher, CT Publications in California. So in 3 years, talk about like you opened that drawer, odds and ends drawer, and it just exploded, obviously.
Yes. And I know people, look, you can do anything at any age. And I feel, particularly when you write fiction, I can't imagine having written these books when I was younger, because I have so much material. So I just decided to try to write. Now, I have to say, I just jumped in and started writing stories. So I feel a little bit like I trained in public. I feel every book, I think, is a little bit better. So I've just signed off this week on book 7. I've got another one I have to start, and I've done 4 novellas and 3 nonfiction books. But they're fun to write. I enjoy it. I work hard at trying to write better, and I do a lot of editing and volunteer editing, which is very self-serving of me, because there's nothing like reading something to think, oh, that's not working. Oh, I do that too.
Right. Well, let's
education. Yeah.
Let's look at some of those titles. So, like I said, I've read number 1, and I've got the rest on my TBR pile. And on your website, which is babsemodi.com, it's going to the books page. Look at this. So are they in order of most recent? And then
Crafting an Alibi, which I might read a bit today, came out 3 days ago.
Right. Yes. Congratulations. Very exciting on your launch. I meant to say that right at the top of the interview. So why don't we just let's get a reading from that so we don't forget to do that.
Everything is kind of informed by my own experience. So my mother's 97. She's in assisted living. And I went and stayed with her in, we sort of rented a unit. And so I lived in assisted living with her for a week. So because of that, then I wrote this book. Crafting an Alibi is about a group of ladies in an assisted living facility. So, and the main character, Valerie Rankin, is she's a sewing teacher. She runs a sort of a crafters co-op out of one of those declining small town general stores. Anyway, so Valerie has gone off to tea. We need cash, Joy said, prim and upright in her seasonal cardigan, knitted maple leaves accented by a gold cat brooch she'd worn for 60 years, and fast. We have a business proposition for you, Bernadette added. We have no one else to ask. And you're my great niece. I told the girls you'd keep this a secret. Next to her, Minnie, the third member of the group, nodded. That's right. We know people say you're quick to fly off the handle, but you never let anyone down. And not many folks would understand our situation. We think you will. I'm not sure I understand, I said. I'd known these 3 women my whole life. Each of them was close to 90. If I was going to get more information, I'd have to be delicate about it. Money? Isn't everything you have covered by the province and your Canada pensions? What financial worries would these ladies have at this stage of their lives? Minnie waved my question aside with her hand, her fingers loose, her rings loose on her fingers. She dressed up for this meeting in a well-preserved wool flannel jacket she'd made herself. Above her covered buttons, a rhinestone brooch and heavy clip-on earrings glinted in the sun that slid in sideways from the windows that faced the bright waters of the North Atlantic. "We're fine, thank you," Minnie said, snapping the crimson bows of her lips shut. I'd insulted her. "The money's not for us. It's for the young people." Bernadette leaned forward. "Between us, we have 23 grandchildren and great-grandchildren." Joyce picked up a teapot and poured. Minnie put another butter tart on my plate. It looked like homemade, the top of the crisp raisin visible in the crack of filling made of butter, brown sugar, and eggs. I was being bribed. It worked. I took a bite. I listened. Okay, I'll skip some of this. Okay. Family costs. She looked sideways at Minnie. Some of us even have inventor grandsons. A good investment. Minnie was proud. Big Bob is a thinker. Why do you think Alexander Graham Bell spent his summers here and moved to Cape Breton when he retired? Nova Scotians are deep thinkers. We've given the world its best ideas. And they are, Joy said, giving me a wink. I had a feeling this was not the first time they'd had this conversation. 1, we invented the portable ironing board. 2, a man in Halifax came up with the idea for backup lights for cars. 3, well, that was the big one. Which one was that? Don't tell me it was something Bob came up with. No, it wasn't his idea, Minnie admitted. It could have been, but someone else got there first. Number 3 is hockey, invented in Windsor, Nova Scotia. You've got a point there. That's one idea that caught on. Joyce conceded. She scanned the empty dining room for eavesdroppers. This is all very educational, but we need to get back to business. Our proposal. I'm listening, I said, distracted and impressed by the butter tart. It wasn't easy to make a pastry strong enough to contain a heavy filling and still keep it flaky. Who made these, I asked. My niece, Joyce answered, then lowered her voice to a whisper. I'll get her to make you some more. But listen, we have inventory we have to unload. Something we've been hiding for years, Bernadette added. Keeping it for emergencies, Minnie said. We didn't want to touch the capital, Joyce asserted, herself as chief negotiator. But at our age, with our expenses, it's time, Bernadette interrupted. She had the most grandchildren, and you're the only person we trust to sell it. Sell it? What did they mean? At the store of the Crafters Co-op? What were we discussing? Knitted socks? Tatted doilies? We'll get to that in a minute. Bernadette looked to her partners for reassurance before she continued. But whatever we tell you today has to stay between us. I looked outside at the view. It was a beautiful, crisp day, one of the last ones of summer. Perfect for a dog walk. Toby and I could walk to the north shore of the island and walk the beach. Agreeing to sell mitts wouldn't take long. Between us, I promised. Good, Joyce said, because there's one little problem with our goods. What's that? I asked. She hesitated. Minnie stepped in. She'd never had a business like Joyce, but she'd run a household for over half a century on fishermen's wages. She wasn't shy about talking about dollars. What we're looking to get onto the market is valuable. But the thing is, she sighed, we stole it.
Oh my goodness. I'm like, oh, so Sue says she can't wait to read this. And I'm like, yeah, now me too. But I promised myself I was going to go in order, but is that necessary? Like now that I've read the first one?
No, they're all have a different angle. Crafting Deception is about a parachute that actually they all have truth in them. about a parachute in World War II that came. Oh yeah, I could tell you all the story. No, they can all be read on their own.
Oh, excellent. And I also want to mention that there is quite a lengthy, a great review in the Miramichi Reader of Book 4, Crafting a Getaway by Sue Slade, who's our East Coast advocate for the Miramichi Reader, and does a spectacular job. So if anybody is looking for more background and recommendations, they can check that out, the Miramichi Reader. So you gave us a little bit of insight into where the storyline came from for Crafting an Alibi. And it's, again, so funny. Like, we have so much in common. I looked after my mom, in the last 8 years of her life, and she was in a small private home, and the last 6 months, a care home. And the characters there, and I was giggling to myself because your descriptions are just so rich and beautiful. So do you find that is an important part of your process, having things that are just relatable and authentic?
I think so. I mean, I can only really write about people or experiences that I have had. I wrote one crafting for slander, and I'd worked a bit as a journalist. I did work as a political communicator for a while. So it's about a Nova Scotia election. I combined political stories about 5 different politicians are rolled into one. And somebody said to me, do you mind? Like, are you worried that someone will sue you? And I said, no, because it's a combination. I said, plus nobody would admit they'd done any of those things. So my authenticity, I do find when I write I can't make up descriptions. So I do often find it useful to go to a place. Like I was writing something that happened on a dock, and I was having trouble with it. So I actually went down to a boathouse and walked inside a boathouse, and that helped. Yeah.
And they're easy enough to find around here. Right.
What I think that your listeners might find interesting is, yes, my publisher is based in the US. Most of my readers are based in Australia, New Zealand, Germany, Northern Europe, the US, obviously. And the feedback I get is your books are so exotic. Nova Scotia is so exotic. Two women from two women from Northern Australia asked me, they said, we loved it when you wrote about snow. You're kidding. So then I thought, all right, the next book is Crafting a Cold Case. I'm setting it in the snow. And, there's salt on the roads. There's like all the things that to us, we think are second nature. But I wrote them a sleet book.
Wow. And not particularly exotic from our perspective, right?
So exotic.
I love that. And so, I think that's really good advice to, aspiring authors or new writers, and you hear this a lot, write what you know. Yeah. And, and I think as authors, we tend to collect, and I love your metaphor of the junk drawer, the odds and ends drawer. And it is so true, because you just pack it away, and because you just never know when you might need that particular, the quirk, the character trait, or the twinge, or what I mean, a facial twinge or whatever. So I just love that. And Sue says she loved when the crafting lady showed up at a debate and took over the first couple rows and pulled out their knitting.
Oh yeah, because one of the characters said that the female candidate should stick to her knitting. So they crashed a candidate debate and knitted. Yeah.
I love that. Actually, I do regular workshops and I have a couple of ladies that come every year and they will often pull out their knitting while I'm,
Yes.
pontificating about something. So I always know, okay, they're either happily absorbing, or they're like, oh my God, Anne, get on with it kind of thing. So you have book 6 is being edited. Book 7, you finished the draft.
Yes. Book 8, I'm kind of putting together the story on that.
Mhm.
So so far I'm doing about 2 to 3 large novels a year, but I really like the novellas because
Mhm.
sometimes I have a small story, and the novellas are minor characters in the big books that I
Mhm.
tell their story, and I write them in the third person. So I
Right.
have a whole other new character who's a young electrician, and I really named Jimmy McNeil. And my niece's husband is an electrician, lives 2 streets over. So he's been giving me a lot of good. So I really, he appears in a couple of books later on, and I want to have him actually do his own mystery. So I'm kind of weaving it. It allows me to keep the community growing. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. And it is so important when you're working on a series, and, and there are some challenges. There are some benefits and challenges.
Yeah.
And, I'm constantly thinking the same as you. So I've got 2 questions. I'm not sure which one to ask you first. So, number 1 is, that's a lot of writing in 3 years. So, first, what is your writing process? How do you, keep motivated? And then as you're talking about that, where did Valerie come from, your main character?
Okay. All right. Well, Valerie is largely me in many ways because I taught sewing classes.
Mhm.
When my kids were small, I went out in the evenings and taught a few sewing classes at Atlantic Fabrics in Halifax.
Wow.
While I did that, I listened to so many stories because people come just to talk.
Mhm.
So that is where she comes from. Um, and I think in terms of my process, I went through a period where because I'd never written fiction before.
Mhm.
Read, I read all these plotting books. I
Mhm.
tried that, and then I started writing, and I couldn't just write stream of consciousness. It took me a while to understand my own mind. And my process now is I will do a little research. I will get an idea. I'll have a conversation. In Alibi, I've got a dog. I walk 4 times a day, and there's a lovely man in my neighborhood who's a retired fire chief. And I'm trying to think of a new way to murder people, and so I said to him, like, "Excuse me, Ron, you don't really know me, but, what can you tell me about arson?" Well, it's like an hour later. It was wonderful. He dedicated the book to him. So I realized for me, my process is to collect a lot of information.
Mhm.
And then so I don't really have a plot, but I can write sort of scenes, like, so I could write like a fire scene, a discovery to scene, and then I kind of assemble them, much like when you sew, like
Mhm.
you have sleeves, you have a front and your back, you make all those and you put them together.
Mhm.
And also, I think trusting your intuitive mind that your brain stores stuff.
Yep.
And so I think it's really important when people worry about their writing to realize you need input.
Mhm.
Writing is output. So you've got to bring in. And an exercise I did when I taught writing at the Mount it was called the uncomfortable exercise, because I would get students who when they were writing, they were trying to sound like a writer, like they were,
Mhm.
uh,
Too hard.
yeah, they were trying, yeah, they were writing like writers, and you couldn't break through. So I had this thing where I told them they had to think of a situation in which they would be uncomfortable, promise me they would do it for 20 minutes, come out of it, and then without any processing, just write what it was, write their reaction. And I found when I did that, their reaction would show me their route to their authentic voice. So, I'll give you an example. I had a girl who was a pastor's daughter. She was one of those people, like the first class would say, "What do I have to do to get an A+ here? What do you you don't say in a creative writing class, what do you want?"
And I'll give it to you. No, right.
It was the most stressful class for her. So she went down to the casino at midnight and stayed for 20 minutes. And she came out and she wrote this thing. I hate Barbara Emodi. Like, this was so awful. And it was just like, and she gave it to me. And I said, "This is fantastic. Your route is moral outrage.
I love it.
That's where your authentic voice is." And so when you want to sound like yourself, whatever the topic or whatever you're trying to do, see if you can access something in it that will ignite your moral outrage. And that's your door.
Wow.
So I think everybody, like for me, it's humor. So if I get stuck, I have a couple of characters who always, I can do funny dialogue.
Mhm.
And because I grew up with an extremely funny father, like it was like living in stand-up,
I love that.
So for me, when I read and I think this is getting like kind of like self-indulgent and I'm writing like a writer, then I will go to humorous dialogue because that's my door. And I think every writer has to find that themselves.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Oh my goodness. You need to come to one of my retreats and do a session. Wouldn't that be fun? Oh my goodness. Tell us just a little bit about your pre-author days, and is there any of that background that folds into this writing?
Yes. Like I've done a lot. That's one of the things when you get older, you've done a lot. But I did work as a freelance journalist for quite a while. And that is like being a taxi driver. That you basically pick up the fare. You've got like 800 words to do before the end of the afternoon. Which actually is good because you learn. So what I learned from that process was to get it done, you have to have an angle. And I'll give you an example of that. When I was sent out, it was like really ridiculous, sent out to interview a very prominent Sackville businessman, right? To do a profile on him because he had done so. And it was like really boring business that he had, like so boring. And I cannot possibly write about this. This is like awful. And I have this deadline and I have to get it filed because I got to pick up my kids from school. Like, what am I going to do? So I passed something. He had a brochure and I passed it to him. And I asked him about it. And he said, "I'm sorry, I can't read." He said, "I'm illiterate. I can't read or write."
There's your story.
I thought, bingo, I got a winner.
Oh, nice.
So, and it was like, because the whole thing was he was good with people. He had all the things, and his workarounds overdeveloped so many other skills.
Wow.
It was a marvelous story. So I think that if you feel hard to get the words out, what you're lacking is not writing. What's the angle?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, what wonderful advice. And Sue says, "I want to live in stand up. We all need to laugh." 100%, 100%.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and I wanted to touch a little bit on, we've only got like another minute or whatever, but the challenges, I know, crazy, right? The challenges that authors face, like once that book is out there. We talked a little bit about, sales and things like that. But if there's one thing right now that if there's an aspiring author who's watching or a frustrated author who just is having trouble like getting the word out, what is the one thing you would recommend to focus on first?
Actually, two things.
Okay.
You have to you've got to have a web page. I would love to do a little workshop on this, because otherwise you might as well be sitting at the end of the driveway, right? Waiting
With
for
a table.
supply.
Yeah.
A web page is important. I think BookBub has an author web page. It's very, very slim, easy, simple. I had a complicated web page. I shifted it over. You have to have, people need to find you. You have to give them an address. And the second thing you absolutely 110% have to have is an author like newsletter.
Okay. Can you tell me where is it? Bookbub.com? I'm just putting a little note in the
BookBub authors. I can send you the link. It's author website by BookBub. I think author's website is the
That's all right. You can add it to the comments when we're done, but I'll just
but you need a newsletter, because you need to talk directly to readers. And it actually, people worry about it, but it can be just like really chatty. Like I actually sent out my sister's butter tart recipe as a newsletter after that.
I love it.
People said they're reading it and they want to make it. And the best thing to do, it costs $10 a month, is to sign up for something called Book Funnel.
Okay.
Which if you have a small standalone free book, it can be a novella, you can go on Book Funnel, you can list that book, and then you can join promotions. So basically, I can put up a book. Anybody wants that free book, in exchange they give you their email address. And I've pared my newsletter list down a lot recently, like for people, because I've been around in like 3 years. It's only about like 4,000 people now, but that is those are people that have shown they're interested in my writing, and so they will buy my book. And those are two things you need. I mean, there's a lot of other things. There's a lot of things you get, like marketing in general doesn't work. Relationships work.
Right.
The more noise, right?
I love that.
The more noise. So you need to do whatever you can. And anybody in my newsletter writes me to tell me, I write them back. That's
nice. That is gold. And you know what? We will do, and this is our promise. And if Barbara, if you're open to this, we will do an author journey entirely on book marketing. What do you think?
Yeah, I would love to do that.
Okay.
I find it frustrating. As authors say, oh, I hate it. But I mean, you just don't sell the book. Like my favorite quote, and I know some people, I mean, obviously my books are not high art. I will be the first to tell you that, because my life is not high art. It's made out of me, and this is who I am. But a book is not a book unless it's read.
Absolutely.
So you need to say, I'm not marketing, I'm not doing business. What you need to say is, I am finding readers.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that is amazing advice. And, I hope everybody will write that down and take it home and really contemplate, how to reach those readers. And Barbara, it has been such a pleasure to have you on the author journey. And, please do come back and we'll continue the conversation.
Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure. And thank you all for watching today's author journey with Barbara Emodi, the author of the Gasper's Cove mystery series. And this is just book 1. She has 8. Number 5 has just released, and there are more to come. So stay tuned for more from the author journey. I hope you're reading some great stuff, and we'll see you next week on the author journey. So I'm Ann O'Connell with OC Publishing saying bye-bye for now.